In Washington, a legal review has concluded that President Obama has broad powers to order a preemptive strike if the United States detects a major digital attack looming from abroad. David Sanger had the story and joins us from Washington now. Hi, David.
Hi, great to be back with you.
So what constitutes a major attack, on computers? How would the government decide that?
Well, Louise, it's the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI who do routine attacks on companies, that they investigate theft of intellectual property. They got involved when a suspected Chinese group of hackers came into the New York Times systems, which the Times reported on last week. But if there is a major attack brewing, something that would take down, say, the power grid or the cell phone systems or the financial markets, then it becomes something that the military would defend against, just as the military would defend against, say, an incoming conventional or nuclear attack on the United States. And so then the question is, how do the president's authorities in ordinary warfare, ordinary self-defense, translate into the cyber world? And the answer they came up with was that the president could authorize a preemptive cyber attack to deter another cyber attack. So if they saw a cyber attack massing, say, in a server in China, they could act before the U.S. Received an attack.
But, there's a lot of different types of attacks that are happening, right? There's some attacks on private companies' computers to steal intellectual property. There's the attacks on the bank sites where they're trying to put them out of service so people can't log onto their bank accounts. And then there's attacks on government websites. So has the White House given any guidance on whether they would consider attack on companies, private companies, for instance, to be of the sort that they would go out and preemptively stop, or would it only be government websites?
Well, these rules are all classified and they aren't yet fully codified, so we don't know for sure. But from the descriptions that I've heard, the answer to your question is no. Unless those companies ran some critical infrastructure, say the power grid in New York or Los Angeles, the cell phone network, emergency response networks, then it would simply go into the world of crime, perhaps terrorism, but not constitute a major attack.
Now, the U.S. has done cyber attacks of its own on occasion, like it did one against Iran involving its nuclear facilities. Tell us how that one worked.
Well, that was not a preemptive attack in the classic sense. In other words, when Olympic Games, which was the program I reported on last year, began to be implemented in the Bush administration and then was handed off to President Obama, it was meant to stop Iran from proceeding with its nuclear program, or at least slow that program down. But there was no evidence that Iran was planning to attack the United States with a cyber capability. Their cyber capabilities are pretty primitive, or anything else. So this was a much more classic covert operation, but instead of sending in saboteurs to blow up the enrichment facilities, which might be what would have happened, say, in World War II, instead, President Obama expanded a program to send in a cyber worm, and that worked for several years until somebody made a programming mistake and the worm got free out of the Natanz nuclear enrichment plant and started replicating itself across the internet. Then the whole world, including the Iranians, of course, discovered that they were under attack.
Now, you mentioned China earlier. Of course, China has been suspected in a lot of the cyber attacks that have already occurred, but China is a major economic partner with the United States. So can you see the U.S. Doing a preemptive attack on China?
It would be pretty complicated. It would have to be an attack that was coming that people thought would cripple critical infrastructure in the United States, because you don't want to get into sort of a tit-for-tat cyber war. And so one of the things the United States tried to do in the strategic and economic dialogue that they hold each year with the Chinese is get China to begin to discuss cyber and cyber attacks and begin to get them into a real conversation about what it would take to come up with some understandable norms. Now, of course, the Chinese were very reluctant to do this at first, and usually when there are attacks that come from China and there's an investigation, the Chinese government says, we know nothing about it. This must have been a group of teenagers. That's what happened, of course, in the Google attack. I don't think I've yet heard a Chinese explanation for the attack on the Times or other newspapers. The Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and the Washington Post have all reported that they were under attacks as well.